All right. So, hello to everybody that is joining us tonight for another lovely episode from the SCA Coaches Corner. How is everybody doing?
Excellent.
Best day I've had in a while.
Wonderful.
Great. Now I
Oh,
get to talk to my
wow.
friends.
That's awesome. All right. Just for everybody that is tuning in, feel free to ask questions. We will definitely try to get to all of the questions. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat box. So ask away and try to keep it on topic if possible, but go for it. So I think that's all I have to do on my part. Brannos, I'm going to pass this off to you if you don't mind getting us started a little bit.
No problem. I'd like to welcome everybody once again. We definitely missed you last week, and hope that we get a bunch of questions this week. If you do have a couple of things from last week that you really wanted to ask, that we don't mind that too much. We don't want to dwell on it too much as we're focusing on training this week or building a training program. But motivation is a big part of building a training program and actually doing it. So definitely, I think it fits in the ballpark of what we're doing. Good part today is we have Duke Sean and Viscount Tristan with us again. The great part here is Tristan runs a dojo in modern life. He has a lot of experience in that space of building training programs and stuff. And Sean, well, Sean is Sean. He can pretty much do anything from fight to sew tunics. So that's me. I'm a bit of a one-stick pony as far as I'm concerned. But I tell you, my passion is what we're going to be talking about. I think all of us truly love being able to help people, and every person is different, and we're going to try to help you guys not only understand how you're different and how to build your training program, but also if you're there, how to provide help to somebody else and make sure that you're kind of guiding them in the right way and training. A lot of times we look at just like, hey, this is how I train, this is the way you should train, and sometimes that doesn't work. It's not a terrible place to start, but sometimes you have to find what fits a student better. And I think I'm hoping that today we'll be able to help you understand and do that, not only for yourself, but for other people. So Tristan, you want to go ahead and give us an idea? I guess let's start out, in fact, with how you built your own training program back in the day. I mean, we'll start with the idea of back when we were young.
I walked uphill to fighting practice both ways through the snow.
In carpet armor.
Carpet armor, that's right.
Barrel helmet. Barrel helmet was true, by the way. Yeah, the one thing about the SCA throughout all the years, and I don't think it's changed a lot since then, although it's gotten a lot better, is you were in charge of your own experience. Like if you had to motivate yourself to get to practice. Once you got to practice, you were in charge of what you did at that practice. You were in charge of how you debriefed, if you did or thought about what you did at practice and how to improve it. And you could go through all the motions and you would get nothing out of it other than just some helm time. And for the longest time, that was the way to do it. And this is where in going into formal martial arts with my Aikido training, they did the opposite, which is they put all students through a very structured set of lessons and drills, and guided their students in a very rigidly structured way through their curriculum. And both approaches have their strengths and weaknesses. And with the self-motivation, what I found is that the plan that I would have would be a short-term plan. And one of the things about that I wanted to bring tonight was when you're forming your plan, don't over plan. Don't try to write half a notebook about what your training is going to be like for the next 2 years. Keep it edible. Keep the chunks small enough so that you can process them, make adjustments to them, and they don't swamp your brain. They don't make it so difficult for you to go to your next practice or do your next thing. And the method that I found worked well for me was, and this actually crosses over to the motivation, and I'm glad, Brannos, you brought that up from last week. And this was the first thing I would do if you start the cycle is I'd be at a practice and I'd say, okay, what did I do well tonight? And what do I really need work on? And I would think about that and be like, okay, next time practice comes, here are my top 2 or 3 things I really want to get out of the next practice. And I just sort of store that way in my head. And then about a day before the next practice, I'd say, what were those 3 things I was doing before that I thought about before that I wanted to work on tonight? I said, okay, how am I going to work on them? When I get to practice, what am I going to do to make those 2 or 3 things really work for me? And how am I going to go about it? And for a day, I'd start percolating on it. And the whole day of that practice, I'd start getting geared up. Like, I'm looking forward to this. I want to go make these things work. I know what I want to do. I'm not just going to show up at practice, put my helmet on and say, okay, let's go. It's be like, no, I want to do these particular things, whether it was, I wanted to get a really great leg shot. I wanted to use head movement to keep from getting hit in the head instead of using blocking, or it just wanted, every week they were a little different. And then I'd go into practice, say, here's my battle plan. I want to work on these specific things. And then I'd work on them. And this is where the cycle would repeat. How did I do? How did I do on working on those things I wanted to work on? Did they go well? If they went really well, I'd spot something else that would take its place on the top 2 or 3 list. If I didn't, if I screwed it up, say, oh, you know what? I totally screwed the pooch on that. I need to take a whole new way of looking at how I'm going to do what I was trying to do. And whether it's manipulating an opponent or any kind of a thing that you want to work on. And then I'd say, all right, next week, this is my list. This is my just list of 2 or 3 things. So my first recommendation is don't overthink it. Don't try to make this grand architect plan that you think is going to take you from here to winning crown tournament. Like, it's not going to work that way. Just do it in edible chunks.
Yeah, and so going along with that, I mean, Tristan is absolutely right. I mean, you can't, you can't fix everything in one night, and you have to be able to focus on just one thing at a time, and you have to focus on that until you actually make progress on that. And that means when you go to practice, you have to evaluate your victory conditions before you go into it to make sure that you are sticking to the plan. Like, you get this idea, like he was saying, it's like, these are the 1 or 2 things that I want to work on. And then you get to practice, and anytime you make changes to your fight, anytime you're doing something new and doing something different about your fight, you're going to lose fights. And you have to be okay with that, and you have to be able to stick to that, stick to the plan, And a lot of times, what will happen is you get into practice and you start losing because you're trying something new, and then you just kind of abandon the practice plan and the training plan, and you just end up fighting, and you just keep doing the same thing you were doing before, for the sake of getting a victory. And so you definitely need to, like, that's part of your approach to practice when you're like Tristan was saying, when you have this plan and you get excited, okay, this is the thing that I'm going to work on. You need to have you need to dedicate yourself to making sure that you stick to that plan regardless of failure, and expecting failure, expecting that you're going to get beat because you're trying these things, and understanding that the real victory is whether or not you made progress on the things you were working on, and whether or not you stuck to the things you were working on. And when you leave practice at the end of the day, you said, I worked on these things, I didn't do them well, but I but I did them, and I didn't just abandon the plan for the sake of, getting some kills. So that's an important part of what he's talking about is pick what you are going to work on and stick to that thing.
So let's talk about the, I guess what I would consider probably a pretty normal fight practice. We all show up. Some people have a plan, but for most part, we're all showing up, we're all hanging out, we're all talking, and then we suit up and we go do pickup. Right?
That's
so,
pretty, oh, yeah.
I mean, that probably covers
Typical.
Pretty typical, right? Do you think that's really, and I'm not pointing straight out. For me, that's a very comfortable place for most people, and that's the hard part. And I think the big piece here is, and I'm hoping that what's going to come out of doing this more is that's just one part of a practice. In fact, that's one part of training. And where Sean goes is that you can get some training there, as long as you're willing to lose, but then you're both your partner and you need to know what's going on. All right. One problem with this method is you may not see the same shot twice at a practice.
Right.
And that does not build that repetitive environment. And so just beware that to become good at something, we want to repeat it. We want to repeat that until we understand and know it. And then we want to take it from that repetitive environment and put it into action in maybe a lower end pool, and be willing to lose at that point just to try to see where it sets up. I can throw a perfect shot on a pill all day, but that shot may never work on an opponent. Right? May work on some, may not work on others. So you have to build these things into a fight, and maybe that shot works after I give one or two fakes. And it's a stepping scenario in practice. So I think we have a bad habit. It's like we have to build that fun right off the bat, because somebody's coming around is like, hey, these crazy people are hitting each other with sticks, what do I do? From our experience, we use a lot of foam swords. One great thing about a foam sword is I can hand it to a guy that's like, hey, what are you guys doing? I'm like, here you go. This is what we're doing. You want to give it a try? And they can essentially use me as a pelmet. And that's that first place where you got to build the excitement. It's like, oh, maybe I do like this. So we're not only talking about, you got that recruiting piece there, but that's the first step. That same feeling, you have to be able to have it. Sometimes a person's going to come to practice and they're just like, I'm not in the mood to train tonight. I just want to go fight. And you have to allow them that space.
Right.
But beware, if somebody's doing that all the time and they still want to get good, then you have to recognize that. I think we don't recognize that all the time. If somebody's showing up and showing up and showing up, they're just trying to do it by themselves. As a good trainer, and we're supposed to be talking about how to set it up for ourselves, but as a good trainer, you want to recognize that thing and recognize that where that person's going, and go over to them and say, hey, you want to work on some stuff, and then break it down. And this is where we're talking about today. He has the motivation. He wants to be better. So what's the first step you take for this person? I'm going to start with Sean on this one.
Yeah. That some of that motivation is, one of the things I always talk about is you can't teach passion. You can't teach it, but it can certainly be learned. And, when we were talking about earlier, when we as trainers, when we get to share our excitement and we get to share our passion for what we do, that is infectious. It's something that people want to be part of. And I think what Brannos is talking about there is, there's some guys that are just introverts that, maybe they don't think that, there's long been this common mythology that, you don't ask a knight for help because, for whatever reason, and a lot of that is this idea that you're bothering them and that you're wasting their time. And all that. You need to understand that the people that have the information that you want and need, those people are dying to give it away to people that are actually going to do something with it. So, if you're afraid to ask some of the better fighters for help, please don't be. We want to help. We are like, your passion feeds our passion. And, but at the same time, like I said, if you got that guy that's sitting over in the corner and he's showing up to practice every single week, and, maybe they're not doing the work, or maybe they're not, putting in the same kind of effort, that we may need to go to that person and say, hey, do you want some help with this? Or some people need to figure it out on their own. And I think as trainers, sometimes all we can do in those situations is make it clear, because we have to, we as the trainers have to make it clear that we are available, without ramming it down somebody's throat. Because if they don't have the passion, then they're not going to be doing it for themselves anyway. Um, and and I think Brannos kind of touched on this a little bit too, that there has to be room in our sport for those people that just want to do this kind of casually. And everybody has to do it to their own interest, and people can show up and just fight casually if they want to. But if that's their interest level, that's fine. But if that person is going to complain about not getting any better, and he's not asking for help, and he's not doing the work, then that kind of it becomes a downer, on the practice as a whole. So there's a lot of give and take, but I think we as trainers, we certainly have an obligation to reach out, or at least make it clear that we are available, because some of the students that are super passionate about what we do, we don't have to tell them that we're available. They're going to find it, and they're going to seek it out. But some of those other ones, we just occasionally need to go off to the sidelines and off to the outskirts and say, hey, how you doing? And you doing all right? Is there anything I can help you with? And just make it available.
Yeah, I think you're hitting a lot. I'm going to coin His Grace Rongalder, and we have some people like that are really, they get in and they're adrenaline junkies, man. They just want to get into the fight and live on that adrenaline peak and just have a great time. And and you ask them, it's like, no, that's fun. And it's like, Rongalder's usually answer is winning's fun too. So, there's a place for both. Yeah, there's a lot of control in competing, but there's that space. You do have to let people grow differently, and I think that's a good trainer can recognize those things. But talking about that, I'm going to throw this one back at Tristan. So Tristan, you guys, most martial art places, you're going to build from base up. You're gonna go through routines at the beginning of class. You got warm up. You're gonna go through certain exercises. You're gonna show some techniques, and then everybody's gonna work through those things. Correct?
Right. And this is the two different realms, SCA and martial arts training is, and I don't like the word traditional, but I'll throw it out there because people kind of understand the basics, are very different in the fact that when somebody, and you hit on it perfectly, you say people show up, they want to get in a suit of armor, they want to live the dream of fighting with swords and shields and be kind of the hero warrior thing. They're the adrenaline junkies, they want to just rock and roll. That's not what shows up at a martial arts dojo. The person who goes to a traditional dojo says, I'm in your hands, sensei, please guide me through learning this. I'm going to open my mind, I'm going to open up my perception, I'm in your hands, you show me what I should be doing. It's like that ultimate guide person, which is the polar opposite of the adrenaline junkie who says, get me in a suit of armor and I want to be Conan, or I want to be, Galahad or something. And I agree, the SCA should be open to the person who wants to be that. And I admit that that's where I started. I came to the SCA because at 15 years old, I heard there are knights and fighting, and I'm like, I'm in. I'm done. That's it. That's all I need to hear. And that was a curve in my own training where I'd like to get into B range, and I'm like, let's just go fast and hard. I don't care if I win. I'm almost giggling as we are just trading shots, and it's just fun. And to this day, I still like that. I realize it's not high percentage in terms of winning, and that's what I had to learn. Getting into being a competitor, there's the smart fight and there's just enjoying it like you're guzzling beer and you're just getting drunk and loving the hell out of it. Like, you know, I still enjoy both of those. I admit it. But with martial arts training, it's so structured that when somebody comes in, first thing is with training somebody, and I know we're going to break this a little bit into, or our intention at least was to break this episode into, how do you develop a training plan for yourself, and how do you develop a training plan for somebody that comes to you and says, teach me? From the teach me standpoint, it's, where are you starting? I'm going to build you a roadmap, but I need to know where you're starting from. I need to know what your injuries are. I need to know how you're fighting currently, or what your previous experience might be. I need to know what your physical traits are, what your mindset is, because really, all of this training, whether it's SCA or martial arts, 80% of it is your mind. I need to know where your mind is to start out with and be effectively guide you step by step to where you want to go. Now, of course, everybody will say, well, where is it that I want to go? I want to be a top tier fighter. I want to be a contender for Crown Tournament, or I want to be among the best. Everybody has that long distance goal out way ahead of themselves. It's where they're starting that's the part that they have trouble understanding or comprehending. And that's where a coach will say, I need to get a handle on where you're starting. Do you have bad knees? Are you overweight? How do you move? You know, what's your previous experience we can take advantage of and turn that into an advantage for your training? Or are you starting with nothing? Do you have absolutely zero? And I actually like starting with people that are at absolute zero, because we don't have to unlearn any bad habits that they got from somewhere else. That takes longer than teaching somebody from the outset. But so I would say that's where I would start is, all right, where are you at right now? And if you're training yourself, if you're developing a plan for yourself, this can be very difficult, because not only are you not necessarily an experienced fighter yet, you're not an experienced coach yet, but yet you have the task to say, where am I starting from? What are my advantages? What are my limitations? What do I want to build? Where am I at? It's easy for you to either be too self-deprecating and saying, I suck at everything. I'm horrible. I got nothing. I don't even know where to start, or to go, well, I'm awesome. Well, you know, and that's probably the worst of the two of them, is to say, well, I'm really great. Well, then why are you training at all? You don't need to. If you're that great, what's the point of going? What do you need more training for? So, but being honest with yourself and saying, what do I really need to work on? What do I want to work on? And those are two very different things, what you want to work on and what you need to work on. And this is where having somebody from the outside can be a tremendous help. And I know right now this is a challenge because of the lockdown thing and the COVID. It's tough. We can do it through video. We want to help you. Getting that that second opinion or third opinion about, here's something you're probably missing, is going to be very important. But get a handle where you're at, get where you want to go, and then the training plan is building the roadmap between where you are now and where you want to be.
All right. So I guess, we're going to attack this backwards, because I think we went into this thinking, let's talk about individual training plan.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if we attack it backwards with showing them what we look at to build somebody a training plan, we're going to ask the questions, and then those are same questions they're going to ask themselves.
They are, definitely.
So let's start that way. Sean, you got a great practice, right? I'm brand new. I come to your practice. What kind of questions are you going to ask me?
So, I mean, obviously, first off, it's, how long have you been fighting, if at all? What other martial arts backgrounds you have? What other sports background you might have? I mean, and some of it too is going to be, again, getting people to practice on a regular basis. But, somebody shows up, because somebody shows up day one and says they want to do this. At our practice, we have loaner gear, so we can put somebody into practice if they bring, if they have their own cup, because we don't loan those out. That's not a good idea. But we can put somebody into loaner gear day one, pretty much, if they want to. And because I mean, the first day is always kind of sketchy, as far as, but that's for, somebody that, just saw us as
Yeah.
they're walking through the park and seeing that. So I think that might be kind of a different,
Yeah, I think
class
that's
of fighter.
yeah. So this is a guy coming to you with already knowing either he's been at your practice for a couple of times, he's already broke in, or he's coming from another place that's already had.
Sure. So yeah, I need an understanding of how long they've been fighting, potentially who taught them their basic stick mechanics. Anybody that they worked with previously. For instance, you get somebody that comes from out of kingdom that comes to your practice. It's like, well, where'd you come from? Who did you work with? Because all of us know that if you whatever kingdom you came from, there's a reasonably good chance that I've heard of some of the people you've worked with. And so getting an understanding of like Tristan said, where they're at, and for those novice type fighters, once we have a kind of basic understanding of how long they've been fighting and what their general experience is, we're going to do a set of we're going to fight, and we're going to do some evaluations to find out where they are, because the evaluation is the beginning of the training cycle. I talk about training and practice and evaluation, but you have to have that evaluation to see where they are. And as Tristan was talking, one of the things I wanted to kind of point out about that evaluation process, in order for us to give you that roadmap that he was talking about, we need to know who you are currently as a fighter, not who you want to be. Because a lot of us, Brannos and I are generally under the impression that, like, you want to be the best fighter in the world, right? I mean, why not? I mean, and if you want to be the best fighter in the world, we can move you in that direction.
Mhm.
And if you have that as a long-term goal, then like that's always our intent. Everything we do is in an attempt to make somebody like among the best. Not good enough to get knighted, not even good enough to win crown. Like, everything we do is like, I'm not teaching you stuff that just works on a handful of guys. I'm teaching you stuff that works on me. I want you to be able to beat me, right? So that's our general plan anyway. But so we know that's where you want to be, and we know you're not there. We need to know who you are right now. So anytime I do any sort of evaluation, it is critically important for the student whoever's being evaluated. I need to see what your real fight is right now. Good, bad, or indifferent. I don't care how good it is, because we're going to make it better. I need to have a clear understanding of where you are, as Tristan was saying. Like, in order for us to give you the roadmap, I need to know where you're starting. And if you show me something other than who you are in that evaluation, I'm going to make a training plan based on what you're showing me, not based on who you actually are. And that's not the training plan that you need. And sometimes it's hard to, I have to explain that to people a lot, because there's this innate feeling that, oh, well, I'm doing some fights with Sean, or I'm doing some fights with Brannos and Rondevalder and Alanon and all these guys, and it's like, I have to show them how good I am. You don't. I don't care how good you are, because you're going to be better. But I need to know where you really are, not where you want to be.
One of the things that when I start with new students, and I noticed this a bit within the SCA, but I really noticed it in teaching Aikido. And that is, and I like the way you put this, of I need to know where your mind is. The first tangible thing, which is, I love the mat, I love the field, and they're kind of the same equivalent of both, is people cannot lie to you. They can't lie to you with how they fight. They can try, but you can see through it. And I know you guys both know, you can spot somebody trying to portray themselves differently than they really are. And that's what I love about training on the mat, training on the field, fighting on the field. You get a true picture of what somebody really is. They cannot hide it. But when a student comes in, I will often try to get a handle of, Are you an introvert? Are you an extrovert? Because that will affect that's the mindset that will affect how they approach their fighting. And because I started in the SCA, it took me a while to learn to appreciate how much somebody's mind will affect how they approach their fighting. And then where the potential is, the greatest potential for them to learn is going to be. And I found that type A personalities are very, I guess for lack of a better word, confrontational, or they're comfortable with confrontation. They're comfortable with attacking. You take somebody like that, and the first thing you want to feed them is, let's show you how to refine your attack. Refine the expressive part of your personality that's assertive. Let's let you express that part of yourself. Then as a trainer, the next thing you do is to say, we need to address the whole, the patient side of yourself, the defensive side, the careful, deliberate side, not just the explosive side, but the side that's defense wins championships. If you're nothing but explosive and attacking, that's gonna suit you initially for a little while, but sooner or later you're gonna realize, I'm getting hit way too much. I need to learn the patient side, the disciplined side. And then on the other hand, you have an introvert, that comes in and says, I'm just going to focus on defense. And literally, when I started the first couple of years, we had a guy that came in, and for a year, he did nothing but block his head. He did nothing but learn how to use that shield and be really hard to hit. He said, I'm not even going to try to throw a blow. I'm just going to learn to have a really rock solid defense. And then he did. And then after that 1 year, then he started using his sword. But it was such a strong reflection of his personality. He was careful, deliberate, defensive minded. He knew that side of the fight. And as a coach, spotting somebody that comes in and says, where is your mind right now? And where can I take it? What do I need to do to take it to where it's going to be effective? What are the holes that you have? What are the strengths that you have? And how to build that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that totally makes sense. So, I mean, I think, and I'll go through kind of some of the stuff I do, but I think what we're coming out with this is with some, real answers of how we look at developing a plan. One is we look at background, of what that person, the martial background. I tell you the truth, I even ask people, are you a dancer? Do you do ballroom dancing? Have you been in band? That helps a lot in melee. I'll ask stuff like that as we go, and so we're trying to find where their comfort is, so that we can build that base for them. So that's one thing I think everybody needs to look at is like, okay, what's your background? Next piece you got to look at is physically, what can and I'm going to say this really carefully, what can't I do? Because I get this a lot. I can't do this because my knees are bad. Mm-hmm. So beware that a lot of people, and I do this all the time. A lot of people's knees are bad because they don't do anything with them. Mm-hmm. They don't strengthen around them. They don't go through PT exercises to build that mass around that knee to structurally support it. And after just getting them through is like, all I want you to do is go from the front of your foot and then to the back. And I just want you to do that every practice. And they'll start realizing they can do more than they actually thought. So you got to be careful on what you actually can't do, but you also have to be very careful on how far you push them and how fast, if they do have an issue. So that may be another piece that, we all look at. We look at things like how fast I am, or how, this is that mentality. There's the mentality piece. I'll jump into that first. That Tristan talking about, I rather figure something out before jumping on somebody, where many other people, that type A is, I rather jump on them and then I'll figure it out. Right? So you have to develop a plan that allows that person that you're working with to still be engaged in what they do. And once they're sold and engaged and still having fun, then you break them into those side pieces. It's like, okay, I'm pretty good at this. What am I not good at? Right? That's the next question. And that's the next thing that Sean would look at. It's like, well, this guy's drawing a sword. man, he's really good at that. His great hand speed, his angles are great. We got him working really well. He's throwing that really nice. It's too bad he can't block anything. So, we're not going to sit there and let him just throw a sword because that's what he enjoys doing. Because really, in the end, and this is Sean nailed the thing on the head, we are trying to make a better fighter than us. Because you know what that does? And I always tell people this is purely selfish. If we make somebody better than we are, then it makes us better. Right? And that's a huge piece there. So, where Tristan comes and talks about that mental side, that's a big, giant piece. And that's, you have to take a look at yourself. Don't go out there and I'm like, oh, I'm kind of I don't like being the guy in the front. So my training thing is going to be 90% of practice. I am just going to jump on people and throw blows, because you won't. It's just, and if you do, you're not going to enjoy it, and you'll probably not learn anything from it because you're struggling to do it. So just be aware of those things. So I'm trying to kind of highlight some of the things we're talking about that we have to look at, not only in helping somebody, but also in helping ourselves. Just a real quick walkthrough. We're lucky enough to have a large practice here in Detroit. We start from, everything. My first goal usually is to motivate people. I want to sell them. It's that first I always goof with people. That first big burst of adrenaline. Is like, hey, that's free. Later on, it's going to cost you. Right?
First, it's free.
That's right. It's a gateway drug to fighting. And so, so I drive them there because they're there for a reason, because they find it interesting. And then the next piece is to work and find and see how they engage with others. How this is a brand new person. We're going to see how their strength is. I mean, I'm big on that. You have to have that core strength, and I'm going to tell you about it. It's no fun. I'm going to try to go through it with you. We're going to go through it with other people. We're going to hey, I'm doing push-ups. Come on, let's go. Or, we have a lot of people. It's like, okay, you're going to start with push-ups on a wall, and we're going to work from there. You're going to do 20 push-ups, and then we're going to work on other stuff. And so, you find that place. So if that's you and you're like, I'm not very strong, well, isn't that something you want to work on?
Get stronger.
Right. And because
stronger.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to be, Arnold or anyone else, to be great. You don't have to be this giant guy, or giant girl. But core strength, to being able to support yourself in what you're doing, is a big piece. And so that should always be part of your training. And it doesn't have to be part of the training at practice. It can be part of the training that you do at home.
In fact, it shouldn't be part of your training at practice. If you do have the benefit, and now I think this last 6 months we've seen what it's like to appreciate the benefit of having a practice to go to, because now we can't go to one. That's precious time. And that's, as an instructor, I will tell my students, your physical training, definitely do that outside of class time, because class time is when we're together. We do the stuff that we can do when we're together, and those are the best things. And I wanted to jump just real quick on the on something you covered just a second ago, and that was, a lot of time coaches or trainers will often think my job is to point out the flaws, and what this will do is will demote that. There's a time and place for it, but if you try to train somebody initially, and you open the door to them and just say, you're doing this wrong, that wrong, the other thing wrong, and this wrong, you're going to demotivate them. That's the opposite of what we talked about last week. And I love how Brannos talked about building on the strength, showing them, hey, these are things you're doing great, and these are working for you. Don't just be so eager to say, but your faults are this, 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 and this, because that's all they're going to hear. And so a good trainer is going to use both of those in tandem to say, what you've got is working great. Let's build this other aspect up so that it matches with your strengths. And so be careful of that. I've seen many, many trainers, including myself, fall to that in years past of, I just need to point out the faults. And then when the person fixes those, then they'll be great. It's not it's the wrong way to go. It's a false path.
And don't do that to yourself. And that's it. And I think that's where that's coming from. It's not only don't do it to others. There are times that you have to motivate somebody. You know, there's lots of times that get people at my practice hate it when I'm like, hey, can somebody go get me an ice cream because since you're all standing around doing nothing. You know, it's you know, so there's some times like that. But you know, the other piece of it though is if you're demotivating yourself, you're not going to keep doing it. And there's no reason that you can't keep doing it because I can guarantee you that you can do something well, at least to start. And I can almost guarantee you that you can do it better when you get used to and you keep working hard. Because I mean, everybody asks is like, do I have to be something special to be great? You know what you have to do? You have to train hard, look for those great fights. Natural ability takes you, but I'm going to tell you, let's talk about natural ability. John will remember these days when he was like 4 years old and he had that sword in his hand. You know, he was out there. He could beat a duke, right?
Yeah, just ask me.
and actually, in the old days, we would just spend adrenaline, throwing everything we had, and because the style was really there weren't a lot of styles, and because it was a new sport, you could win against knights and you could win against dukes and you'd be like, yay, and then you fight the brand new guy and he'd hit you with something you have no clue of, you know. So you know, that existed back then, but I'm going to tell you now it's much tighter, and you know, and because people are dedicating time and making good practice, this sport is becoming a martial art into itself. And we learn all these little tight pieces of the game. Not everybody, but you know, I'm going to tell you these kind of episodes that we're doing now and all the other episodes helping increase that knowledge. But you know, we're getting better and better at this game because we're becoming smarter fighters, we're becoming more physically, you know, we understand it's like, hey, I got to have strong legs because everything comes from the floor now, right? You know, it's those kinds of things, and you can do that. But you have to, you know, you have to be the guy knocking on the dojo door saying, this is what I want to do, right? And that goes to SCA fighting practice too. It's like, this is what I want to do. I really want to learn. Help me. And then you take a look and you're like, and if you don't have that guy, but I can guarantee you there's a bunch of people on the internet that will help you. But if you don't have that guy, take a look at yourself. Like, I want to become better at this. What do I have to do?
Yeah, we kind of touched on a point a couple of different ways about, you know, where you are, what you want to be, that sort of thing. You know, you talk about that initial adrenaline rush of, you know, the really that initial excitement of, you know, you put somebody in lone armor and yeah, I get to hit people with a stick and not go to jail, right? Oddly enough, that initial burst of energy and excitement, that is what I consider the first plateau, where because it's everybody's excited when they first see it, then they're like, yeah, this is cool, I get to do this, and then you get into armor and you start trying it for a while, and then you realize that this is going to take some work. And you know, how many people, you know, throughout the history of our society have put on armor one time and said, "Oh, this is cool. I get to do this," or come to 3 or 4 practices and said, "Oh, this is great. I get to hit people." And then when it starts becoming work, they decide that you know, maybe this isn't for them, and that's one of those things that happens a lot, and it kind of goes back to that. It goes back to that passion. But you know, something else that you know, Brannos had mentioned is that, you know, our sport definitely has become a more of a martial art. And I think, particularly in the last 15 years, from when the 3 of us, Brannos, Tristan, and I, among others, Paul, Finvar, so many other people were at Known World Rattan Symposium in Callantyre. You know, I think that was kind of the beginning of better training methodology across the board. And that's where I think the training methodology that we had all been kind of using independently, I think that's kind of where that sort of started going global a little bit more. So yeah, the information is definitely out there. You know, it's with the same amount of effort, you can be far better than we were, you know, in the early 80s when most of us, you know, mid to, you know, it started, where it was like, okay, here's your stuff and go out and do the thing. Like Brannos said, I mean, I remember after I did pell work for like a year and a half before I started fighting. And I went to fighter practice a week before Estrella. And, I went out there and I killed a couple of guys. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I could totally do this. All right. And then I go down to Estrella and I just got mowed like everywhere I went. I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, okay. So yeah, I got a couple of kills on some guys at practice. And again with the victory conditions, it's like who was I killing? How good, how good were they? How good were they not? It's like, and I don't know. But I go out there to Estrella and all of a sudden I start fighting these guys and yeah, I mean, I'm getting mowed down. And it's that perspective. You gotta take that and as Tristan was talking about, you do have to recognize the positives, right? Um, I'm always saying that we learn more from our failures when we do our successes, but identifying those failures is the mechanism for giving you a solution. We don't just tell you that you're a bad fighter. We don't tell you that there's something wrong. We say this is a deficiency and this is the solution. So now you take this solution and you go home from practice to practice, you go home and you work on this solution that we provided for you, and then you come back again and we'll say, yeah, you made progress on this solution, and either identify another deficiency or continue working on that one because it still needs work.
It's funny you mentioned that story about going to Estrella because I had almost exactly the same experience the first time I went to Penzic. And I think I was 19 years old when I went. I at practice, I thought I was pretty good, and I got out there, I couldn't hit anybody hard enough. And it's not because the calibration was off the charts. I mean, it was just that I had been training in an area that was doing just very light blows, and I came back and I'm like, God, I sucked. I got hit by everything, and I couldn't. The few hits that I was able to land, they weren't solid. And rather than beating myself up, I just said, that's unacceptable. What do I need to do to fix this? I need to learn better form. I need to learn, better body mechanics. I need to learn. It was like a menu that opened up to me of all the things like I want to do this and I want to be able to do that. And granted, right now, we don't have the ability to go to events or to get those experiences, but they are, like you said, they're not points where you beat yourself up. They're points where you say, this is potential. This is something I grow into now. I did just see that we got a question, and they were talking about, I guess the question was, how do we attract that person to our sport? And I guess the context was when I was discussing the person that wants to show up and get an armor and have a good time, chug a beer and get into some fighting. My experience says like attracts like. If you have people that are doing that at your practice, when those people show up, they'll go, I belong here. If you're having a practice that is of a certain orientation, you're going to get more of that. And so if you turn your practice into a hardcore martial art, the beer chugging guy is going to go, this is a hardcore martial art. This isn't what I signed up for. I'm leaving. Likewise, if you get a bunch of beer chugging and you get a martial artist who says, I think that I want to do this as a martial art, he's going to say, this isn't a serious group. They're a bunch of drunken brawlers here, and that's not what I'm in for. So I think in terms of, to answer that question, is comprise your practice that addresses the interests of the people that not only are there, but of the people you want to attract and get more of. And pure and simple, that's going to be that formula.
All right, look like we have another question, and that is, okay. And this is really, I think a lot of people, we have a lot of we had some pieces put together of what we look to develop a training plan for others as a coach and so on. But I think this gets right down to what people came here for. And that is, how do I set up or plan a structured learning practice? And I'm going to put this at first with like, how do I set up myself a structured learning practice for myself? Because you can go to a practice and still have that, even if they're not doing it. So just we're going to start it on a personal level. And this is, we're trying to get at it. It's relatively, there's a little bit of art form to put a put a plan together for yourself. But you know, we did cover, you know, I think some of the things that help is grab a notebook. I had a notebook for a while when I first started. I asked my folks to have a notebook. Their notebook covers a lot of stuff. In fact, if you ask one of my squires, she has probably gone through 3 notebooks. So, but grab a notebook and say, all right, the first piece is, do I think I need to, you know, do I want to treat this more like a martial art? And if that your answer is, I want to be more disciplined and have structure in a practice, then you need to write it down. I mean, Tristan can talk how there's a structure to almost every martial art out there. But you know, your first piece is warm up, and that doesn't always mean you got to be careful on the fundamental of stretching and warm up. But there's warm up, and that way that you can body can be warm to prepare. But you should put that. It's like, how long am I going to warm up, and or what exercises am I going to? If I'm going to go out and, you know, like for myself, I usually sometimes run around the yard, or I'll do wind sprints. All right, just to warm it up a little bit. You know, I'll do some light, you know, not really hard dig in stretching, but some movement with my body and stretching. But you know, I add those at the beginning. Then my next piece is I'll dig into things like ladder drills and cone drills, right? Because and I've been digging into those more than ever. I mean, in the last 2 years. All right, and those are great warm-up drills. They're great footwork drills. They're fundamental. Boxers do them all the time. If you can add rope work, and what I mean by rope work is jump rope work in, it's great for bursting your feet and things like that. But you can go out and look and find what a structured practice is from almost any martial artist online. You can see a boxer's structured practice. So it's like, I want to be really, you know, I want to be I'm more of a thinker. Than you may tend towards some thinking martial art and say, okay, here's the things I'm going to build into my structured practice. I'm a little bit more free. I want to get that boxing piece, and you may build that a little bit different and add different exercises in it. But then the next piece you need to do, so you got to write down what your structure of practice, what things do you want to hit? You don't even have to write down times. You're like, okay, you know, I'm going to do these 6 ladder drills. Okay, those 6 ladder drills are becoming easy. I'm going to do them twice. I'm going to do them twice and backwards, right? And you keep building on those so that you get better and better at them. And then, you know, and that goes with every piece. Then you go to the next piece. It's like, I'm going to grab my buddy and we are going to work on a shot he wants and a shot I want, or something Sean told us. All right. And we're going to work through that drill, because guess what? I'm going to throw it 10 times and you get to block it 10 times and throw something else. And you get to actually practice it. All right. So, but now that's a fundamental thing. We do that in martial arts all the time. We have drills where we stand across each other and train. And so next piece is to lay what those are going to be, right? So your next piece is inside that. You're like, okay, I want to work on the flat snap. I want to work on a leg shot. I want to work on and dig through those. There's lots of shows out there that right now are showing people how to throw leg shots and how to throw head shots and how to do all this stuff. If you see something, say, I want to try that. Hell, I'm for 20, 30 years now, well, mostly probably 20 since I saw it. I've been trying to throw that rising Westy Uther snap, and I did it once. In fact, I pinged him, and I'm like, oh, I did it, and then I couldn't do it the next week, right? So I don't train enough on that. But the idea is that if you see something, train it. And I guarantee you that other person will be happy, and he should say, okay, I want to try this. I want to block better, right? So there's always exercises in there. And if you're running out of it, reach out to somebody and ask. It's like, hey, you know, what should I work on next? Because at some point, you know, I'm working with somebody right now who's a Duke somewhere else. Ping me, is like, hey, can we set up a training program? I'm like, sure, you know. And, you know, he's great. I mean, I've known the guy forever. And, you know, so I'd ask questions, you know, and I get to that point where we're going to start laying in, okay, these are the things I'd like you to do. First thing I told him after he sent me some video so I could evaluate what's going on was he went to practice. Lucky enough, he has some people he can do that with. And I said, how about write down 3 good things and 3 bad, 3 good things you did at practice and 3 things you can work on. Because what? Guess what you're doing? You're making yourself a list of things you could get better at. Right? That goes right in your book. Write down the day. Here's my 3 good things I did. Here's my 3 bad things, or 3 things you have opportunity with, and move on. Right? Then you take that, look at it the next week and say, okay. And then if it's still not coming together, like I've had this happen for weeks, put a big yellow line on that thing and say, what drills do I have to create to make this work better? Right? So, you know, you're structuring that practice, but always at the end, leave some time to get some real practice in. You know, you can get some light sparring in first, but at the end, go ahead, get that real practice in, because that's going to teach you things that are really hard to do in just practice. Is one of the benefits of our sport is that we fight a lot. So reaction, the use of energy and tension on people,
Live interaction.
yeah, those are pieces that, you know, the use of changing the time in your fight or tempo. Those are the types of things you find in a real fight. There are some practice exercises you can do those, but to really get the feel of that broadness of how everybody reacts, you still only get that in the real fight. So that should be part of it as well. The last piece is sometimes you just have to go to a practice and have fun. Because it is so important to you. And then take that practice. Like, I'm just going to go, I'm going to do pickup all day, and then I'm going to write me a list of where I got hit the most, and all you put your 3 good ones down, put your 3 things you have opportunities with, and then write some notes. Here's all the things I want to know. Because that's the self-evaluation is the biggest piece, and that's what we're talking about here. But you got to write it down. You're not going to store all that in your head. So build yourself that list. And then you have a guide to go with it every practice. And it's pretty fundamental guide. I mean, they've been using it in martial arts for hundreds of years. And so adding that is not going to hurt our sport. It says we have to know how to fill in those gaps with techniques that we use. So that's my point on the structured piece. Sean,
Yeah, I think the Roaring Waste practice that Brannos is at, I think is more of a structured practice than what we have. But one of the practices we have here in Loxalan, which is the Salt Lake City area, we are known not just in our kingdom but abroad as a training oriented practice. We long ago eliminated the concept of being the king of practice. Because you always got that guy that wants to come in and just beat up on everybody and go home and say I killed everybody at practice, and that may feel good, but you don't learn anything doing that. We eliminated that a long time ago, just kind of almost by accident. But don't come to our practice and think you're gonna be the king of practice, because we'll line you up with all the kings we've had at our practice and see how things go for you. But if you want to learn, we can do that too. Ours is a training oriented practice. It is typically with any one of the knights or dukes that we have at our practice. You typically have me, Duke Timmer, Duke Floki, Duke Lachlan, Count Raven. You've got plenty of guys to choose from, and all of those guys are vastly different fighters from one another too. So if I'm working with a guy and we do some fights and I'm like, you need to work on your range control. That's something that Floki is particularly good at. I'm going to send him over there. But typically the fights that we have, we'll do 2 or 3 fights, and then we'll talk to somebody for a half an hour. We'll do 5 minutes of fights, and we'll talk to them for 20 minutes about what they did, the good and the bad of it, and what they need to do for next week. It's certainly a lot easier when you have people that are showing up on a weekly basis, and that they're going to go home and do this work, and that we'll be able to see them next week and see what they do. But we basically run through that training process in action. We'll do a set of evaluation fights, which is going to be somewhere between 3 and 5 fights, and we'll talk to that person about what they needed to do. We'll do some walkthroughs, and we'll do some drills, because in that training process, you've got the evaluation, and then you've got the training. And the training is where you are taught how to do the thing. And well, that's what practice is for, because that's when we're all together and you have access to to those trainers. And I can tell you, okay, here's your shortcomings for tonight. This is the solution for it. Now you got to go home and do that practice on your own. You got to go home and you got to do these drills. You know, these are some things that you can do on your own, so that when you come back next week, we go through the whole process again. But you know, we don't have, you know, a list of, you know, knights and dukes that are just standing on the field all night long doing nothing but fighting. I mean, I'll have, you know, 2 hours worth of fighter practice, our regular baronial fighter practice, where I might fight 3 or 4 people, and I will be completely satisfied with my day at practice, because the 3 or 4 people that I did get to fight with, I got to spend quality time with them. I got to go through some drills. I mean, you guys know, Brannos, Tristan, you know what it feels like when you know that you just made somebody a better fighter,
Oh
like
yeah.
in an instant, and you're like, that guy's better now than he was an hour ago.
Yep.
And that is, yeah, I don't have to fight a dozen people at practice to feel good about myself, when I can fight 3 or 4 people and be immensely satisfied with what I was able to provide for them. And that's been kind of the hallmark of our practice. That's what makes it I think one of the best practices in the world. Um, and when you have practices like the Roaring Waste, you have the Nutley practice out in New Jersey, the Strong Guard practice up in Vancouver. You know, that's another one where you go and you're getting taught how to do things. The Twin Moons practice down in Aidenvelt, the Dallas practice down there with Sven. There's all these places, these little pockets of you know, talent hotbeds, as we like to say. And when you look at all the best practices in the known world, the thing they have in common is they are training oriented. They are not victory oriented.
When and I like how you bring this up, and I reflect firstly that, you know, people are probably now wincing and like, oh my God, I remember how great it was to have a practice to go to, and we don't right now.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I wanted to impress on people in tonight's episode is that your training plan with what you're working with for somebody might be as short as somebody walking over to you say, hey, can we fight just a little bit and you can show me something. It might happen at a pickup field at Gulf Wars or whatnot. You're not going to be training them for 6 months. You're going to be training them for 20 minutes. And so that may be as small as your plan is. Or you might be at your local practice and you've been working with another fighter for 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, and you know them well enough to say, I know where you're at and I know the next thing that you need. I'd say that person is a little less challenging than the person who walked up to you as a complete stranger and you need to, in 2 minutes or 3 minutes of fighting, get an assessment of where they're at, figure out what their next step is. So realize that if you are an experienced fighter, a knight or somebody who's been around for a while, those training plans can be that small and that granular of how can I bring this person that I'm with, who's a student, even for just a half an hour, how can I get them a victory? How can I get them to something that they can walk away from me right now being better than they were when they walked up to me? So I've found that it's easier when you know the people that you're working with on a regular basis, because they're part of your home group, or you fight with them quite a bit, and you really know them inside and out. But as you do it more, you'll get greater insights where you can help people from even seeing a little bit of them versus a whole lot of them. And that kind of crosses over into how do you train yourself? You should know yourself, but we also have the downside of being a bit delusional about what our own traits are. And whether we beat ourselves up too much or we blow a lot of sunshine up our own skirts, whichever side, it can be kind of problematic. But we at least have those things of, what do I want to do? And I think we could probably do a whole nother episode as practices start up again, later, one of the things I found very helpful was, okay, what if you go into a practice and everybody else is just sparring and you want to have your structured learning plan? How do you deal with that? The way I would approach it is, all right, for example, I want to learn to really be able to block my leg. Who's got the best leg shots in this group? And I'd go and say, hey, let's spar a little bit. And by the way, I want you to take my legs off. Do your absolute best. Basically, you want to get from that person what you want to train in. And the flip side is the same thing. And I found it as a night at my local practice, I'd get into the habit of, when somebody wanted to come and spar with me, say, oh, what are you working on tonight? What can I help you with tonight? Is there something you need from me or you would like from me that will help you? Where are you at? And a lot of times I'd get, probably 80% of the time, I don't know. I don't even know what. Okay, well, let's see what we can find. And to have that mindset rather than all right, I'm going to, just fight my best. And if they want something, they'll say something. So you have to kind of draw it out of them. But I just wanted to offer that up too.
Yeah, I think, and somebody had asked specifically, and I think Sean covered it pretty good, but, how do I change my practice from just a sparring practice without a lot of focus to something that's maybe a little bit more on the training side?
Lag there?
Sorry, you guys still got me?
Yeah, now we can hear you. There was a bit of lag.
We got you.
All right. So one thing I would say about changing your practice is start slow. And even if you got a lot of resistance, then look at doing some things before practice even starts. See who is interested. So, hey, are you interested in doing one-on-one stuff in a group, and we're going to just cover certain techniques? Go a half hour early, right? If there are people, and remember this, there are going to be people that just have no interest. They're not here on their day off to have a structured practice. They're just there to have fun, and you have to make that space for them too. So let them do their thing. Mix it in. Say, hey, and we do this at our practice all the time. It's like, hey, Ronvalder, can you just take all these guys over there and walk them through some footwork drills? Or can you show them this shot? Or, hey, everyone, we're going to work on the ground game, right? And then we all watch, and we have a number of people helping each other, and we'll rotate. Another way to do that is if you do have a couple trainers, go to them and ask them. It's like, hey, would you mind if we did a bear pit once a week? And then you would give some input on what you see each person fighting like in that as they come out of the bear pit, right? So you get some feedback of what other people saw, right? So there's ways to put things in your fight practice. Ours was large enough for a while where we had 3 different bear pits running. So we had a novice, an intermediate, and then the advanced where most of the nights were. And so, there's probably anywhere from 6 to 10 guys in each list. But the best part was you could actually, if you didn't feel like you were doing well in your list, you could go down. So we had knights fighting in the intermediate list because they weren't, maybe they hadn't been practicing for a while, or they just weren't at that level, or they okay, I want to work on something, so they dropped down to that intermediate list. And we had beginners go up to the intermediate list because they're like, I'm kind of smoking everybody in that list. I think I want to compete at that level. So if you do have the ability to do that, that's a really nice place to go to. Last piece on Tristan's he's dead on. You want to learn something, you tell that person. Communication is the biggest piece. Just like building a plan, communication is the biggest piece in building a plan. You have to let other people know what you're doing. You have to let that person that you're fighting is like, hey, keep hitting me in a leg because I am working on something. Because I'm going to tell you, a really good fighter will hit you in a leg twice and go, I don't want to abuse him. And then you won't see it anymore. And in fact, he may go and say, okay, I'm going to throw that. And after a few times, he's like, you want some help? And then you're getting exactly what you're looking for. That's what communication does. So communicate. This also goes the other way around. If you're the knight and you're fighting somebody, before you just, the first thing is you have to fight them. And I've been around the world, and I do this all the time. I pull the unbelts on one side, the knights on the other, and I look at them and I say, do you guys fight these guys full out all the time? And they're like, oh no, I don't want to fight them full out because, it's really, they're not going to have fun and it's going to be abusive. Then I go over to the other side and I look at all those, unbelts and I say, hey, what would you feel if I said those guys aren't fighting you guys full out? And you haven't seen so many pissed off faces on than ever, right? And they're mad because some of the best ways to get good is to make sure you do see those full fights. So training for a night on that level is, here's where the communication, we do this all the time. We're going to train. We train for X number of bouts where we're just working together. And then at the end, I say 3 good fights. And that means everything off. I tell the knights all the time, it's like, your job is to single shot that person 3 times in the same spot. That guy knows. And in fact, after 3 weeks and he blocks one of those single shots, what did he just learn? Right? You have to give him that opportunity. But, that's the communication side. That guy doesn't mind. He's like, okay, we're training. I told him we are training. He's happy about that. I told him, okay, you want to go 3 good ones? And he's like, yep, let's do it. I'm in the deep end of the pool now. But now everybody's getting something out of that practice because that unbelt really wants you as the knight to get practice too. And that's what those 3 top end fights are. You need to turn it on and go. If you're never practicing turning it on and going, then there's a training plan for you. Start figuring out how to do that.
Yeah, that's one of the distinctions that I have to make is there, in practice, there's deficiency training and then there's sparring. Deficiency training is the opportunity that we have to give somebody to exercise the things that we've been working on. And we have to make sure that that's in a safe environment for them to fail, because when you make changes, you're going to fail. And so there's that deficiency practice. But at some point, yeah, you have to have sparring, because if the only chance you have to do full on all out sparring is in a tournament, there's a lot of emotional baggage that's associated with the tournament that just really complicates you being able to actually learn how to do the thing. So yeah, we have to make a clear distinction also between training and practice and sparring, and to say, okay, well, we're going to walk through some stuff and some drills. I'm going to let you, throw some stuff at me. Okay, now we're doing, practice, and now, okay, are you ready to do sparring? And that's where you get into those last 3 fights. I also wanted to touch on, I think you're talking about, it is one of the most frequent questions I get as a trainer is, how do I change my practice from a victory oriented practice to a training practice? And when we started off our practice here in the Barony, we got a lot of the training influence from Sagan. Sagan impressed upon us the value of training, and for the longest time it was me, and it was now Duke Floki and Sir Gregory of Beck. Of course, the 3 of us, but right before we became a kingdom, we were the 3 guys that were off in the corner doing 2-on-1 with each other, because that's the level of training that we wanted to do. And for a while, it was just, it was the 3 of us. So it's you and one other person, or 1 or 2 other people. And usually what ends up happening is those 3 people end up getting better. And somebody else says, well, why are those guys getting so much better, so much faster, and I'm not? And they come over and say, what are you guys doing? And it's kind of, and that's the point that Brannos is trying to make, is you got to start small. And because not everybody wants to train at this level. And it took the 3 of us a long time to be able to read the room, as it were, and to figure out, where we can, with the level of training that we wanted to do, how do we get that to the masses, and in kind of a, maybe even a diluted fashion, so that it was easier for people to kind of comprehend and kind of buy into a little bit. But yeah, it started with the 3 of us, and now 15, 20 years later, like, we have entire generations of fighters in our barony, generations of fighters, squires that were, my squires, that now have their squires. We have entire no idea that it's not like this in most places. It's like, this is what practice is. You go and you get taught how to fight, and then understand that no, most practices you go and you just fight and hope that you're going to figure it out. And that was something that just kind of, it started small. It started with just, me and Floki and Greg. And, we dedicated ourselves to that training model. And then, yeah, now that's what our practice is. That's what it's been for close to 20 years now.
Well, and the thing is, and to bring this around to what we talked about at the beginning of this episode, and that is training is navigating with a roadmap. Imagine taking a journey without any map. How long will it take you to get there? You might not. It will certainly take you longer. And I think you touched on the description of, well, why did those guys get better? Why are they getting better quicker? Well, actually mentoring and teaching and learning from somebody who's experienced is quicker than going out and learning how to do it on your own and learning to reinvent the wheel all by yourself. And so that's the downside of the pure sparring. You can get good, but it takes a long time to do that. So I think that's a good case for those people that want to say, well, I'd like to learn how to do this. I mean, they learned how to do whatever it is their professional ability was. They went to school, they got people that were experienced to show them how to do it. I mean, there's should be a pretty strong case for that model of learning rather than just, well, I'm just going to throw a helmet on and go figure it out.
So we're looking at probably about another 10 minutes here, guys. I'd really like to see if there's some other questions out there. We're going to throw that out to the crowd because we definitely love answering them. And, between us, we can talk forever. So you jump in anytime.
Yes, we can.
I think the key here is in making yourself a training guide is to be dedicated and understand yourself and understand those things, that the weaknesses you have, and work them. Everybody knows how to work harder than they do. Believe me, I tell people all the time, I work way harder now than I did 30 years ago. Way harder than I did 15 years ago. And in fact, adding all the stuff I've been adding in the last 5 years, probably way harder than I worked 5 years ago. So, we know that working hard is the piece that really gets you somewhere. Now, making sure that you're doing the right things when you're working hard is the other piece. And sometimes, you have to be creative there. Sometimes, I know Sean, we went through a class on, kind of a drill class where I was showing everything from ladder drills to pad drills. There are tons of people showing all kinds of different movement drills and things like that online. So, you have to get educated, and then education is the part that will fill in the blanks and help you. You're like, okay, this is what I want to do. The other piece is make time. Your training plan, you might be a damn good fighter now, and you're like, oh, I got a pretty hard training plan, but I don't travel out. I don't get enough big fights outside of my area. So your training plan might be 2 times a year, I'm going to travel somewhere where I'm going to go get big fights. There's lots of places offering that kind of thing now. There's big giant practices that happen once or twice a year. There's major wars that have a lot of pickup. I don't care if you don't like melee, just go there and find a pickup. And it's those kinds of things. So be aware that your training plan never ends. You could, but start it slow. Don't jump in, over your head. Start it slow. Training plan is, I'm going to start doing some things I practice to get better. I am going to ask that night if he will just, give me one lesson every practice, right? I am going to go pick somebody online and say, here's what I am doing. One of my squires was in Drakenval in Sweden. And he just got knighted a little while ago. I've never met him until he came to a Penzak after he was knighted. And we trained for probably about 3-4 years. He'd send me video 2-3 times a week. I'd cut him video and send it back. So it is not impossible.
Yeah, it's funny you should mention that. I've actually got somebody that I'm working with in Ireland, in
Hmm.
Drachenwald as well, and I had a chance to work with her at Estrella and redid all of her stick mechanics. And since we have been in shutdown, um, she's been putting in that work. She's
Yeah.
been doing the pelt work, and we go through. I'm like, okay, well, this is the next step of the pelt work, and you're doing this good, so let's move on to this next step. And it's really interesting that even though we can't fight right now, there's so much training that can be done, especially in stick mechanics, especially in pelt work, footwork drills. There's so many things you can be doing on your own that when we go to practice and we're actually fighting, um, you, there's like I said, there's the emotional component that is involved in this person is trying to do me bodily harm, right? This person is throwing sticks at me, and there's an inhibition there that is created because you're so concerned about what is happening to you that you can't concentrate on what you're supposed to be doing. And in some respect, this time where we can't go to practice on a regular basis, I don't know that there's been a better time
Yay. I
to
agree.
start from the ground up and learn the physical skills that you need to be doing, at least for like, I mean, in a given fight, you can only control your portion of the fight, right? You can only control, your offense. How your opponent responds to that, it becomes a defensive component. But the part you can control is the blows that you're throwing and the steps that you're taking and all this stuff. I don't know that there's been a better time to learn from the ground up. And and Agnes, who I've been working with over there in Ireland, she has been doing this work, and it's been really fun to see the progress. Even though, yeah, they're not having regular practices either, but I can see that progress, and it's been really fun. And I mean, even for me, I've done the 100-day Pell Challenge. I'm like 50 days into my second round now. Because when I started doing this, it was the beginning of the quarantine. I'm like, I don't know how long we're going to be here, but here I am. I mean, 150 days later, and my left-handed work is getting a lot better. And I started that in an effort to be reminded of what it's like to not know how to throw again, and what it's like to be a student again and be a first-time fighter again. And this is a really good time to start from the ground up.
Yeah, and I can't agree with you more. And in fact, not only is it a good time to learn techniques and physical side, we all can work out better. We all can get in better shape. We can all push our bodies a little harder. We have this time to do this. We have time and people online to help you with those things. But even more, I mean, you guys had a great episode with Duke Uther on. We get the opportunity to, and this is a practice too, to see the inside of a fight from two great fighters of the society. Get to see lots of other shows to see the kind of inside of how a person evolved from, hey, here's when I started, here's I am now king of wherever, and you get that whole piece of the background. There's a lot of great stuff to learn inside of there because you may be that guy next time, and learn from their experiences. So part of that training could be, I'm going to make sure I hit, Coach's Corner every week. Big tag of our show. But, that may not only be it. Me and Sean both go to Great Fighters of YouTube, where we evaluate and play around and hang out with our buddies. And we got, a lot of people are like, well, you get on there and all you see is a bunch of Dukes all in one page. But I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of people that are in there, and they're getting a chance to listen and hear stuff. And it's this inside stuff that, you don't dare enter, this little 10-man or 5-man, 10-man circle that has a bunch of white belts or everything else. You stand way far away. And for most reason is we're all buddies. We have something in common. So this is why we're doing that. It's not we're trying to keep people out.
Yeah.
Right.
And we love talking about stick.
Oh boy. So use that and remember. And I couldn't agree more, Sean. I think there is so much great opportunity now. It's hard when you don't have that feedback from others. I mean, but the opportunity to just grow is huge, and finding that motivation. Tristan and I had that class last week, and that's rough. Sometimes you're going to run into those hard times, and Tristan posted up a great article on our page about some of that and understanding it better and things like that. So we're out here, guys. Really want to help you. It's no different than how we want to help our own people at practice. There is, Sean said it earlier in the show, there is no better, feeling than to help a person become better at something. I mean, Tristan gets to live that day in, day out, being a martial arts instructor, and but it is, it is just
It's what keeps me
soul
going.
filling. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
what, 100%. I mean, it's our
I've had
life.
plenty of success for myself, and
Mhm.
being able to give that success to other people is that's what keeps me going.
Mm-hmm.
There are two tangible things I wanted to make sure and put to people, and that is, when you're forming your plan, start with one of two things. One is a deficit or a problem that you see you need to solve. I'm getting hit in the head too much. I'm getting hit in the leg too much. Figure out how you want to solve that problem. That's going to be the basis of your plan. The second thing is steal from other people. I want to be able to throw a shot as good as Brannos throws that headshot. Like, have those things in mind when you watch videos, when you're doing, pursuing your fighting virtually the way that we're doing right now. There's tremendous opportunity. Look around for stuff that says, I want to be that good at it. What do I need to do in order to get strong in what that person does really well? And I've found great satisfaction in finding people that are doing things that I want to be able to do, and just say, I want to try to copy that. I want to try to integrate that into my practice. Maybe it starts out with some power work. Maybe it starts out with, how do I get my footwork that good? How do I get my movement that good? How do I
And hey,
get my
don't reinvent the wheel.
right?
Yeah, there you are.
Exactly.
Those
Steal it.
those guys are out there, and if you see somebody do something you want to do, we have the power of the internet is just ridiculous. Just send them a message and ask them. You don't have to figure it out on your own. The tools are out there. Ask them.
Hey guys, there was one more question here. There's any books you can recommend on a topic? I'm going to guess the topic today is setting up a training plan.
Right.
I think off my head, I'd love to say I burn through books. I don't burn through books that often. So, Tristan, you're a little bit more of a book guy.
I am a book guy. I will say that most of my training stuff has come through live person experience as opposed to books. One of the best is, and this is something you can look up on YouTube, look up Mike Tyson and his relationship with his coach Custom.
Oh, yeah.
You talk about the power of mentorship and the power of coaching somebody. And Tyson, people want to think like he was just a natural. He had some natural talent, but he really was he was a diamond in the rough, and more rough than diamond. And it was a good coach that took him from basically a kid with mental problems, which he always dealt with depression throughout all of his life and still does apparently, but guided him. And there's some great videos that go through that process of how he did it, and showed the combination of not just technique, but of character and of mindset and all the things it takes to bring greatness out of a student. I can't think of a better story off the top of my head than that one.
So maybe we can find that link and try to post it up for somebody. I'll find a link on Lomachenko's father, who's an amazing man. He pushed his son to efforts that hardly any sport has ever seen. He has some other people in his stable that are Usyk and a few others that are incredible as well. So I'll pull. I thought I saw a video on some of his training methods and things like that. I'll try to find that and post it again on the comments for the when we post this Zoom up, so that we have a couple more references you guys could all use.
Yeah, there's a couple other books that I've come across. One that I highly recommend is The Talent Code.
That is a great book.
Yeah, the Talent Code basically it is the science behind muscle memory, for lack of better explanation. But it just kind of describes how some of the talent hotbeds get created. There's another one that I saw. Akhtamasadi's out in Antir had answered about the fear is the mind killer. That is another excellent book written by a female martial arts instructor. I want to say in the Pacific Northwest area. She wrote a book about how to basically about how to get buy-in for, especially for marginalized groups. Being a woman in the martial arts, she kind of created a training program that kind of it caters a little more to diversity in male-dominated sports. One of the other books that I would definitely recommend that I read recently that just really struck a chord with me is called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell.
Another great book.
Yeah, and that's the one that, as Tristan was saying, you talk about Mike Tyson. People think that. I mean, that's the thing. All of us, me, Brannos, Rondevelder, like we were just born from the womb this good, right? that it had to be right. Outliers, for me personally, it is the explanation of my success in that I was kind of a product of circumstance. I hit fighting at the right time. I mean, there's just no better way to say it. I just hit it at the right time.
In the right place.
Yeah, the right time, in the right place. Yeah, I had drive and I had motivation and I loved it, but I also had the pieces were in place and I just did it at the right time. And it kind of demystifies the whole idea that people are good because they're smart or because they were just born with natural talent. Natural talent helps, but the effort and the work that you put into it is far more important. I mean, Jerry Rice worked harder than anybody else.
Yep.
That's what made him as good as he was. It wasn't because he was a natural. Randy Moss was a far more naturally gifted and talented receiver than Jerry Rice was, but Jerry Rice just outworked everybody. Also, just last night, I finished watching The Last Dance on Netflix, the Michael Jordan story, talking about the last three-peat that they had there. Powerful stuff. If you have Netflix, I think it may have been an ESPN production, but if you have Netflix, I definitely recommend that. It's 10 episodes. Man, it's powerful stuff. It is motivating, it is inspiring, and it talks about all this stuff. It's like the people that work harder are going to be successful, and it's not because they're smarter. It's not because there's no gift. So there's a couple of books and some series that I would definitely recommend as well for training specific stuff. I mean, we could do a whole episode on.
Yeah, we have thought about doing a whole episode of books to break down.
Oh, we're gonna have to add that to the list now.
But related specifically to training, yeah, the Talent Code, Fear is the Mind Killer, Outliers, those are all good ones.
So we'll post those up too in the comments so that everybody has those, and that way I know what they are too. So maybe I could read a couple of them. Another good part about being part of the show.
Maybe you can have your squire read you a bedtime story.
Oh, hey, now we're talking. Maybe she could do it voice on tape, and I'll just listen to it. We're running a little bit past. We thank everybody for kind of hanging out with us here. Once again, please post questions. We actually have a ton we were talking about before the show. We have a ton of great trainers and great people on the SCA Coaches Corners group. They've been incredibly helpful. Before I even get the chance to jump in on something, somebody's answered some of these questions, and I look at the answers and I'm like, they nailed it on the head. So post stuff up there, guys. This is a community. It's it's just not us running it. That's right. This is a community, and this is the way we want. We all are working together to be something better. So if you have a great book, post it up. I guarantee you that Sean and Tristan will read it, and I'll look at the name. So, but let's be a community. Let's be a community that's trying to help each other. Let's take Sean's practice where we're just spending time trying to make each other better, and let's make that bigger.
It pays off.
It
make that the norm. That's the thing.
Huge.
I want to make that the norm.
I agree. All right.
And as always, now that she's popped back on screen,
yes.
I'd like to send out our thanks to Vesper for producing for us.
Thank you, Vesper.
pretty huge part of the success of this whole show, and we appreciate everything she does week in and week out. And in addition to the interviews that she's doing on her own, so
But
thanks
she
as
has to
always.
put up with us all the time. I don't even know how
Yeah.
she does that.
Yeah.
I mean, she got the best seat in the house, really.
Yeah, yes, she does. All right, lady, turn your mic on so we can hear you.
I know. I was saying it really is the best seat in the house. Like I'm over here taking notes and stuff, and I started reading something that was mentioned last episode. So yeah, I'm getting the goods. It's awesome.
Thanks for all you do.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.
So we'll see everybody again next week. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
indeed.
definitely.
Indeed, we got a good next week episode is.
Are we doing the conversation?
Oh, yeah, actually, I got to nail him down. He said he would do it. I have to make sure he knows the time and that he didn't have anything come up. But next week's conversation is with His Grace Lucan.
Yeah.
So he has a lot of great stuff. He's everything from the steel game, the SCA game, to the steel game, to running a medieval dojo.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what a life. The dream come true. There we are. Let's. I hope everybody comes out. We'll have some questions for them. We hope everybody break your books out. I told you to get and put some questions in there and pop them up for us because I guarantee you we're looking for a really interactive episode with him. I know I have a bunch of questions.
Just to address the question thing, because I know we've had a number of episodes now, and we get a few questions in.
Yeah, here and
a
there.
lot of people that just quietly listen, and listening is cool. But if you want to fast track to understanding something, ask a question. Don't just wait and hope that it's going to come up or the topic is going to answer whatever's around in your mind. Step forward.
Yep.
Be assertive. Ask that question. Get the answer, and we love providing it. So
yeah, we're here for you. So yeah, definitely looking forward to that episode. Hopefully we have everybody there. Tell a friend, and look forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah. See you all next week. Have a good
Thanks, guys.
week.
have a
Bye.
good weekend.
Bye.